Nobody saw this coming. Absolutely nobody. The Toronto Blue Jays just shocked the entire baseball world by winning the AL East division in 2025. But here's the thing, just 1 year ago, this same team finished dead last in their division. They were a complete disaster. ESPN called them a franchise in free fall. They spent hundreds of millions on free agents who completely flopped. Everyone thought they were done. But then something incredible happened that changed everything. And the story of how they pulled this off is absolutely wild. Let me paint you a picture of just how bad things were. In 2024, the Blue Jays were a laughingstock. They finished 73-89, dead last in the AL East. That's 16 games under 500, 16 games. Their own fans had given up. Season ticket sales plummeted. The media was calling for heads to roll in the front office. Sports Illustrated wrote an article titled, "The Blue Jays are broken beyond repair." The Athletic called them a cautionary tale of how not to build a baseball team. The roster was aging. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. was openly talking about testing free agency. Bo Bichette was rumored to be on the trading block. George Springer hadn't been productive in years. This looked like a team ready to blow everything up and start over. So what did they do? They went out and spent massive money on 3 big free agents. Anthony Santander from Baltimore for nearly $100 million over 5 years. Max Scherzer on a 2-year deal, and Trevor Hoffman to be their closer. Finally, Blue Jays fans thought management is serious about winning. This was supposed to be their redemption story. The Toronto Star ran headlines like "Blue Jays ready to compete again." TSN had analysts predicting they'd win 85 games and compete for a wildcard spot. Spring training looked promising. Santander was hitting bombs in batting practice. Scherzer looked healthy and motivated. Hoffman was throwing 98 miles per hour and talking about how excited he was to pitch in meaningful games again. But here's where it gets crazy. All 3 of those expensive signings were complete disasters. Anthony Santander, their $100 million man, played only 54 games because of injuries. A hamstring injury in April, a shoulder problem in June, a back issue in August. When he did play, he was awful. His batting average was under 200. He struck out in 35% of his at-bats. The only thing I remember him doing was taking 3 minutes to round the bases in AAA during a rehab assignment, and even that became a meme on social media. Max Scherzer, the future Hall of Famer, had an ERA over 5. This is a guy who's been one of the most dominant pitchers of his generation. 3 Cy Young Awards, over 3,000 career strikeouts. But in 2025, he looked every bit of his 40 years. In his last 6 games, his ERA was 9.9. Hitters were teeing off on his fastball like it was batting practice. And Trevor Hoffman, the guy they signed to be their closer, gave up 15 home runs in less than 70 innings. For comparison, some starters who threw 100-plus innings gave up the same amount. He blew 6 saves by the All-Star break. 6. Blue Jays fans were booing him at home games. There were calls on sports radio for him to be released. By May, this team looked completely cooked. Their 3 biggest investments were dragging them down, and everyone was ready to write them off again. The team was 15 games under 500. They were already 12 games out of first place. Season ticket holders were selling their seats for pennies on the dollar. ESPN's Jeff Passan wrote a scathing article titled "The Blue Jays' $400 million Mistake." He said, and I quote, "This might be the worst collection of free agent signings in modern baseball history." The Blue Jays didn't just waste money, they actively made their team worse. The Athletic's Ken Rosenthal was even harsher. He wrote, "The Blue Jays have become a cautionary tale about why you can't just throw money at problems and expect them to go away. This roster construction is a masterclass in how not to build a contender." But then came the moment that changed everything. The front office made the boldest move in franchise history. They gave Vladimir Guerrero Jr. a $500 million contract extension. $500 million over 10 years. The biggest contract in Blue Jays history, the biggest contract ever given to a player under 26 years old. $500 million. That's not a typo. They bet the entire future of the franchise on one player. The media went absolutely insane. ESPN's Stephen A. Smith called it the most desperate move I've ever seen in professional sports. Skip Bayless said the Blue Jays had lost their damn minds. The New York Post ran a headline that read, "Blue Jays go all in on fool's gold." Some called it desperate. Others said it was the dumbest contract in baseball history. The Toronto Sun sports columnists were split down the middle. Half thought it was genius, half thought it would bankrupt the franchise. But here's what nobody understood at the time. That contract wasn't just about Vlad. It was a statement to the entire team that management was all in on winning. It was a message to the clubhouse that this organization wasn't giving up, wasn't rebuilding, wasn't accepting mediocrity, and something magical started happening. George Springer, who everyone thought was washed up, suddenly started playing like it was 2017 Houston again. Remember, this is a guy who hadn't hit 25 home runs since 2019. He was 34 years old and looked like he was in decline. But something clicked after the Vlad signing. Springer started the season on fire. By June, he was hitting 320 with 18 home runs. By the All-Star break, he was leading the American League in several offensive categories. He became a top 3 hitter in the American League out of nowhere. Nobody saw it coming. But it wasn't just Springer. This entire offense became a machine. They led the entire league in batting average at 278. They led in on-base percentage at 340. In a world obsessed with home runs and strikeouts, they won by making contact and getting on base. Francisco Lindor was having a career year. He went 30-30, 30 home runs, 30 stolen bases. Pete Alonso was crushing the ball. Even role players like Addison Barger and Miles Straw were contributing in ways nobody expected. Their approach was completely different from the rest of baseball. While other teams were swinging for the fences and striking out 200 times a season, the Blue Jays were putting the ball in play. They had the second lowest strikeout rate in baseball. They were manufacturing runs with small ball, situational hitting, and aggressive base running. Their pitching wasn't spectacular, but it was solid enough. Kevin Gausman emerged as a legitimate ace. Shane Bieber, coming back from Tommy John surgery, was better than anyone expected. They had a rookie named Trey Savage who came out of nowhere to become a key contributor. And here's the crazy part. They did all this while their expensive free agents continued to struggle. Santander was still hurt. Scherzer was still getting rocked. Hoffman was still blowing saves. But it didn't matter because everyone else was stepping up. The real turning point came on July 3rd when they swept the Yankees in Toronto to take over first place. That series was incredible. Game 1, they won 8-3 behind a complete game from Gausman. Game 2 was a 12-inning thriller that they won on a walk-off home run from Vlad Jr. Game 3 was a blowout where they scored 11 runs in the first 5 innings. From that day forward, they never looked back. They went on a tear through July and August. They were playing .600 baseball, winning series after series. The Rogers Center was electric again. Fans were showing up in droves. The atmosphere was unlike anything Toronto had seen in years. But it almost slipped away. The final week of the season got scary. The Yankees, who had been struggling all year, suddenly got hot. Aaron Judge and Giancarlo Stanton were hitting home runs every night. They won their last 8 games of the season, 8 straight. Going into the final weekend, the Blue Jays and Yankees were tied for the division at 91-68. The Blue Jays held the tiebreaker because they had won the season series, but they had to avoid a collapse. Their final series was against Tampa Bay, a team that had been playing spoiler all season. The Rays had nothing to play for, but they're always dangerous. Game 1 was tight, a 4-3 Blue Jays win that took 11 innings. Game 2 was a nail-biter that they won 6-5 on a late rally. Then came the final game. Winner takes the division. The pressure was enormous. 47,000 fans packed the Rogers Center. The atmosphere was electric. You could feel the tension in the air. The Rays jumped out to an early 1-0 lead, and for a moment it felt like the wheels might come off. But then the Blue Jays' offense exploded. George Springer led off with a walk. Davis Schneider walked. Vlad Jr. singled to tie the game. And then Alejandro Kirk, a guy people made fun of for being slow and overweight, came to the plate with the bases loaded. Kirk had been having a career year, but this was the biggest moment of his life. The crowd was on its feet. The season was on the line. Kirk worked the count to 2-1, then got a fastball right down the middle. He turned on it and sent it 420 feet into the left field seats. Grand slam. The crowd went absolutely nuclear. Grown men were crying in the stands. It was pure pandemonium. But the drama wasn't over. Kevin Gausman, their ace, didn't have his best stuff. The Rays came back with 3 runs to make it close. The Blue Jays had to use their entire bullpen. Every out was a battle. In the end, they won 11-4. The final score made it look easy, but it was anything but. They had to fight for every run, every out, every pitch. They won that final series against Tampa Bay, finishing 94-68 and earning the #1 seed in the American League playoffs. 94 wins from 73 wins in last place to 94 wins in first place. That's a 21-game improvement in one season. From worst to first in one season. From a team nobody believed in to the top seed in the American League. The Toronto Blue Jays proved that in baseball, anything is possible. That $500 million bet on Vlad Jr.? It looks like genius now. He hit 42 home runs, drove in 118 runs, and was the emotional leader of the team all season long. Sometimes the craziest moves are exactly what a franchise needs. The failed free agent signings? They became a footnote. Nobody cared that Santander, Scherzer, and Hoffman didn't work out because the rest of the team more than made up for it. And now they're heading into the playoffs as the team nobody wants to face. They have home field advantage throughout the American League playoffs. They have momentum, they have confidence. They have a lineup that can score runs in bunches and a pitching staff that's been battle-tested all season long. The Blue Jays have shocked everyone once this year. They went from the laughingstock of baseball to the #1 seed in the American League. Don't bet against them doing it again in October. This is why we love baseball. This is why the game is beautiful. Teams that defy all expectations and prove the experts wrong, you need to subscribe because I've got more incredible baseball stories coming your way.